Raider Nation, things are heating up for Las Vegas ahead of the draft. There are some reports and some rumors by credible sources that the Raiders may seriously make a huge move. This could mean a new quarterback. This could also mean a new dynamic receiver next to Davante Adams. And the Raiders have made some more signings. They have some more players visiting the facility. We're almost at 46,000 subscribers. If you want to help us grow, click that red button. The Raiders have signed a longtime veteran nose tackle, John Jenkins, right here. The big run stuffer from the Miami Dolphins just signed by the Raiders. Jenkins is at 6'3", 340 pounds, drafted in the third round by the New Orleans Saints in 2013. Wow, this guy's been in the league for some time at this point, but he's still playing and he's still making plays in the run game. And I was very impressed to see, what he was able to do with the Miami Dolphins last year. Spent the past 2 seasons with them, picked up 9 pressures, actually had a decent pass rushing grade, despite the fact that, like we said before, built to really defend the run, kind of a big body defensive lineman, mainly trying to absorb blockers to let somebody else go free and make some plays. He wasn't able to get a sack last year, but still got some hurries and still really had some splashy games, and mainly against the Buffalo Bills. He did play a lot in pass defense, actually, and still was able to have a decent grade there. So 33 years old, we'll see what he could do. The former Georgia Bulldog, but the Raiders looking for some reinforcements on the defensive line and looking for people to fill in because they've lost people like Andrew Billings. We know the Raiders just signed Jerry Tillery to a 2-year contract. They still have Bilal Nichols on the final year of his deal, and they drafted Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. last year. So I do expect those people to be ahead of somebody like John Jenkins on the depth chart, but I think Jenkins will fill that nose tackle role. And thank goodness that Tom Brady did not join the Raiders last year. I just thought that'd be freaking lame if we had Botox Brady as part of the Raiders last year, but he is now acquiring a stake in the Las Vegas Aces, so still going to be part of Vegas, still working with Mark Davis, and Mark Davis still gets his guy Tom Brady, who he's just in love with, but this time within the WNBA. Now, even though the Raiders have signed so many wide receivers and they have so many on the roster so far, Cam Sims, they just signed, re-signed Keelan Cole, obviously big contract for Jacoby Myers, and Tyler Johnson was signed before free agency even started, and they also have Philip Dorsett as well. But they are also taking a look at DeAndre Carter. This guy was a playmaker under the radar for the Chargers last year, especially when they dealt with key wide receiver injuries. And it's crazy that the Raiders keep trying to add wide receivers and not looking for defensive players, but I am going to explain later in this video why, and why I actually do think it might be the best choice right here, right now. But if you don't remember, Carter had a pretty good game against the Raiders, had a 90 PFF grade, 1 touchdown, 64 yards against the Raiders last year, and ended with over 538 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. But he clearly had his best season last year and really the most action he's ever had in his career, and you've seen him bounce from tons of teams throughout his career. He was even part of the practice squad of the 2015 Oakland Raiders for a brief period before the Raiders went on and grabbed Bryce Butler. Then they moved on from DeAndre Carter. I definitely think he'll be higher on the depth chart than a lot of wide receivers. I think if he joined today, he would still be, 4th or 5th on the depth chart. But this really means that maybe Hunter Renfrow might be on the outside if they are looking at wide receivers like Carter. And apparently they're looking even bigger at wide receiver, as you have the news that the Raiders have been inquiring about DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals. You had Adam Jones on the Pat McAfee show explain the 5 teams that are interested in DeAndre Hopkins. Now, would this be a great move depending on how much it costs? Sure. DeAndre Hopkins, though, does have a fat contract. I think $30 million against the cap this year for the Cardinals. I think they're trying to offload some of this contract onto a new team. But do I really think the Raiders are just inquiring about DeAndre Hopkins alone? No, I do not. The Arizona Cardinals have the number 3 pick in the 2023 draft, and I believe that is what the Raiders are actually eyeing. You have Ian Rappaport saying that he's hearing buzz that teams are calling the Cardinals about the number 3 overall pick to try to get a quarterback. And we know previously the Raiders did try to trade up, and there is somebody who they do like in the draft and think is worthy of trading up for, but the Carolina Panthers stepped in and traded with the Chicago Bears for the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And they gave up multiple first-round picks, multiple second-round picks in the process, and the Raiders were not willing to do that. But could they give up a little less to get the number 3 pick in the draft and pick the 3rd best quarterback in the draft, and then in the meantime take care of DeAndre Hopkins' contract that the Cardinals want to offload? I think this is the play that the Raiders are making here, and I think this is a smart play and more of a budget way to trade up and find your next QB. And look, we know the Raiders have met with CJ Stroud, they've met with Bryce Young, they've met with Anthony Richardson, they had top 30 visits with Richardson and Stroud. And at the pro day, they did talk to Bryce Young, and we don't really know who the Panthers are going to pick. If I had to guess right now, I would say they would pick CJ Stroud. I think he fits the mold of what somebody like Frank Reich wants to do. And we don't necessarily know what the Houston Texans want to do. Maybe they like Bryce Young, maybe they like Will Levis, maybe they like Anthony Richardson. We don't know. And we have the Indianapolis Colts here sitting at number 4. We can guess they want a quarterback. I think they could even go for Anthony Richardson because we know the head coach there was with the Philadelphia Eagles and ran that QB running dual threat style offense with Jalen Hurts. And the Seahawks and Lions, don't be shocked if they take a quarterback either if anybody falls. So I think the Raiders want to make this smart play here and see if the Carolina Panthers, if the Houston Texans can slip up and maybe somebody like Bryce Young falls to us. Maybe somebody like CJ Stroud falls to the Raiders at pick number 3 and they get a quarterback who could be their franchise QB on that rookie QB contract. Or maybe the Raiders are confident that teams are going to pass up on somebody like Will Levis and maybe they like the guy. I find the fact that they have not met with Will Levis kind of suspect. They've shown that they've met with Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud, but they have not done that with Will Levis. And it makes me think, is this a McDaniels sneaky move where the guy that he really wants is the guy who he didn't meet with? I would not be freaking surprised. But I think ultimately this would give fans a ton of hope. The Raiders do not have a backup QB right now who's solid under Jimmy Garoppolo. And even if you love Jimmy Garoppolo, even if you think he's the greatest and going to take us to the highest of highs, you have to admit this guy has injury problems. And if you're having him at QB, you need a backup plan. And the best type of backup plan for somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo would be a QB, a rookie QB in the first round, a young guy who you believe can be a franchise QB and can ultimately replace him when he is ready. That is really the best type of backup QB scenario the Raiders could hope for right now. And the reason being is because you're not wasting time on a guy who's not going to be here in the future. That's sort of the problem when you have a backup QB, especially a veteran. They're going to eventually leave. And look at Jarrett Stidham. This guy eventually left. And now he's going to be telling all of our secrets to Sean Payton now that he's working with the Denver Broncos. And the Raiders clearly look dead set on trying to build an elite offense rather than trying to spend a lot of money on the defensive side of the football. And I think this is actually the smart decision because the Raiders have enough pieces in place right now to have an elite offense. And there is no possible way that they can build an elite defense or a great defense in just one season. There is way too many holes there. So I think that's why they're doing some low risk, short-term investments on the defensive side of the football because they know it's going to take time to build that anyways. And if they want to have any chance at all at being successful this year, making the playoffs, the only way they're going to be able to do that is through their offense, having such a great offense that it compensates for a bad defense. So I actually do like the fact that they're looking at tons of wide receivers. Very clearly in the tight end room, they're going with more blocking style tight ends. They're not going to look for their production in the passing game from their tight ends. And instead, they are going to try to rely on their run game with Josh Jacobs and these wide receivers. And I think this is the best call. If you have a QB who's not elite on their own, who's just average, you need amazing pieces around him in order for him to be successful, in order to make his job easier. And this would also help a rookie quarterback when they come in. Have a lot of talent around them. That way they could easily assimilate to the NFL. Either way, guys, let me know if you think the Raiders should do it. Should they pull the trigger and trade up for the number 3 overall pick and take on that DeAndre Hopkins contract? Let me know in the comments below. If you're still watching, I really appreciate it, man. Check out some of these other videos that I have here if you have not yet. My name is WiFiWillie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.